Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. I'm your host for this session. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're going to talk about a unique problem that you might be having in your sales process and your sales world. This 15 minutes is designed for salespeople, sales managers, and CEOs of the company that are trying to increase their revenue and trying to be more productive in your sales processes. So let's get started.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining us on this podcast. Thank you, everybody out in listener land, for being on board last week. And if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, stop now, go back, listen to that one. Because we're actually going to continue on with the conversation that we had last week. Last week, we talked about what happens when you skip steps, when you don't do all the steps. This week, we'd like to talk a little bit about you've now skipped a step. You realize that you should have done something earlier in your sales process. How do you back up, get back to where you need to be, cover your bases again, and kind of dig into that a little bit? Kevin, I kind of set you up a little bit. We were talking about it for last week. What do you think? What can people do when they know that they've kind of screwed up a little bit on their sales process?
And this happens a lot. This is not a moment where we're looking for a ruler and to rap somebody on the knuckles. Skipping steps happens, and when you have that realization moment, it's not a moment to try and beat somebody up. If you're a sales leader, this is not where you're pulling out the accountability chart. This is the moment where we go, oh man, we've missed this, and if we keep going, we're going to end up in the no decision land. We're going to end up in the bad place, whatever the bad place is. I like to think about this as backing up a train. You've got a lot of cars that are, put together, but you've got this one that's just out on its own. When you back up the train so that you can recapture the step that you've missed, often I like to address these from a style standpoint as a sales leader. What is the next step in the process? Have we covered this step from a questions in a sales meeting? I like to ask, what is next? What is missing? What is now? But from a salesperson's vantage point, if they realize that, address it head on. The practice, or I don't call it role play, I call it practice. Practicing this is actually a skill. It's coming to a prospect or a person saying, hey, in my sales process, what we traditionally do to ensure that we give the best customer service is we do this. And I actually skip that step. I tell them that I skipped a step. That way I'm building trust. I'm raising my hand and saying, hey, I've made an error and you can trust me because I'm willing to admit my own errors. That by itself, that kind of approach is a style approach. But the goal here is to get back in the sales process. If you have not identified how they buy, like their internal process, for example, if you're dealing with a large national bank or trying to prospect a large national bank, it doesn't matter who your champion is or what level you get to in the organization if you are not set up in their procurement department. If you have not been set up as an approved vendor, it doesn't matter how good or well priced your solution is, they cannot buy from you because you haven't gone through their proper process. At best case, you're going to be delayed by however many months it takes to get there. If you realize, oh shucks, I'm working with a very big municipality, big corporation that has a professional buying process, call it out and say, hey, I recognize that dealing with you, you have a vendor management portal that I have to sign up on. I'm willing to do that work, and I realize I skipped that step now. Do you have a contact that you could introduce me to there to be my guide and coach to get that done so we don't delay your project, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect or customer? That kind of tactical backup is really straightforward. What's a little more dicey is when it's not a tactical miss. It's a, hey, I didn't qualify this person in the right way, and now I'm about to present a proposal or a scope, and I don't have all the right people in the room. And you don't want to offend your coach by saying, hey, I recognize that you can't sign this PO, so I'm not going to present it to you. But you have to find a way to go back and back up that train because, right, you've already invested time and effort into getting to this scoping stage. You got to back all that up and get to a point where you can start or restart the sales process.
Great analogy there with the bank. I'm going to give another analogy if you don't mind. It's more along the I didn't qualify or I learned something, because this happens a lot. We didn't actually skip the step except for we didn't talk to enough people. I like to say, if somebody's going to place an order that is 5% or less of my annual quota for the year, I probably need to talk to 9 people at that company. If they're going to place an order that is greater than 5%, and depending on what you sell, that number may be 10%, that may be 2%, whatever that is for your company. But if they're going to do a 10% of my quota, my annual quota kind of a deal, then I might need to talk to 25 people. 9 people versus 25 is a big change. But you've gone through this process now with this customer, this prospect, and you finally have realized this is a bigger thing. And when I usually have a bigger order, and I'm just going to make a scenario here, I have to talk to the VP of engineering, I have to talk to the VP of manufacturing, and I have to talk to the VP of shipping or supply chain for that company. And if I haven't done that for a big order, then I'm probably going to be in trouble. And because I thought this was a small order, you just scoped it wrong in your head. I thought this was going to be a small deal. You were just talking to VP of engineering. And all of a sudden, questions start coming up there about the VP of supply chain or VP of shipping or the VP of manufacturing that you haven't really covered. You haven't worked on that whole relationship. It's not unusual. We didn't skip a step. We kind of shortcut a step. We didn't do it all because we thought we were fine. And then we found out, ooh, this is going to be a bigger opportunity. There's more people making decisions in this company. The meeting that the customer is having, the prospect is having, is going to have 2 or 3 people in it. Said, should we do this? Is this okay? Let's move forward. It's going to have 10 people in the room, and you've only talked to 3. Now you have to go to the client or the prospect and say, I kind of screwed up. I really didn't spend any time with the VP of manufacturing. I didn't build any of that stuff. And you need to go to your champion. And I know I'm throwing a word in there that maybe some of you aren't familiar with, but you need to go to your champion. Your champion is the one that wants you to win. They're not just trying to solve the problem for the company, but they think you're the right answer. You got to go to your champion and say, we really haven't spent any time with the VP of manufacturing. And he's going to throw an 8 ball at me big time if I don't cover a couple of things that he's going to be worried about. He's not going to know. And that's just going to screw up when I'm forecasting this deal because we're going to get all the way to a point. And now we have to get the VP of manufacturing on board. We have to get the VP of R&D on board. And I haven't done any of that yet. So, hey, champion, can you help me out? Can you help me back that train up a little bit? And let's start over, not with the whole company, but with at least these other 2 or 3 departments that now I think are going to be affected. So I kind of built that story out a little bit because guess what? I've seen that happen a lot with those exact titles because many of the products that I've sold in the past had to deal with those exact titles. But it's not unusual for you to say, I thought I could get by with only knowing 2 or 3 people in the company to make a decision or 10 people in the company. And now I find that I have to know a lot more. I need more people to trust our product, trust me, trust our company before they're going to make this decision because this is going to make a bigger impact. And I didn't ask the right questions up front. You got to go to your champion and say, "Help me out, save me, because I'm in a bad way. I need to get all these people on board. Otherwise, it's just not going to go well." Now, there's a chance that your champion was the one that told you that information. And if you have a really, really good champion, he's the one that says, Sean, you really didn't cover all those things. And I'm starting to get questions from the manufacturing guys about how this is going to affect their lives. I'm starting to get questions from the shipping people about how this is going to affect their lives. And we haven't really covered that. He may be bringing that information to you and causing you to back up that train that Kevin was talking about. But either way, we need to effectively and quickly address this issue and move backwards and just kind of start the whole sales process over again at a departmental level, at multiple departments level. Kevin, what do you think about that?
I really think that this goes back to the way we set up people for success in our organizations. If we think about how we've lived at sales operations and sales process design, we also have to build our teams in a way that allows us to think about how we're backing up that train with a customer. We have to almost put ourselves in the organizational leadership seat and say, well, how would we solve this in our business? And we have to teach and train our sales teams to do the things externally that we are as leaders are doing internally.
I think it's interesting that as a sales leader, you cannot be condemning your salesperson. This scenario that I was just playing, potentially this deal that I thought was forecasted to end in 2 or 3 weeks, now we just added a month to it. And The sales leader has to say, shame on us. We should have done that. What can we learn from this situation so it doesn't happen again? But what you don't want to have happen is to force the close to happen when you're not ready to happen. You need to make sure that when you start closing, the answer is yes, not the answer is, oh no, we don't have enough information to make the decision. Understanding that and then playing that back, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I would agree, and I really liked what you said about engaging your champion. If you're listening to this, think about who the cast of characters is. You've got champions and coaches and advocates and foes and friends. You've got all these people in the organization, but your champion and coach could be the same person, but could be separate people. That champion is a key role for you. But Sean, I had the thought when you were talking about who else or what other types of businesses might our listeners be engaged with. Some may not be dealing with professional procurement departments and really big organizations where there's 9 different departments. A lot of my customers in the past were small family owned businesses where there's a family structure, infrastructure with maybe some external people that are not family but associated with the leadership level, senior leadership teams, where the decision team may only be 7 or 8 people in total, and that's the kind of scenario where we think about, well, we've got a similar sales process. If that's our target market, we have a different sales process, but it's similar in structure. Figure out the economic buyer, understand their buying process, document the pain or the value they're paying, those kinds of things. In the smaller environments, let's dig into that for the last few minutes and talk about how salespeople and sales leaders that are selling into the smaller businesses might also gain traction by backing up a sales process. I'd lead that off by saying typically the tough question to ask, the sales step that gets skipped there to partner on to what you said in the last podcast, is that people don't ask about competitive projects. There's always a resourcing and bandwidth issue, and we don't talk about it because that's really where we can get an early no. And we know as salespeople, we get happy ears. The happy ears is a term I like to use for salespeople who are really excited about the conversation they just had. But the moment I ask them, I say, well, "Who'd you have that with? Was that with the economic buyer, or was that with just the person who answered the phone?" Oh, it's just the person that's director level so and so. Well, does director level typically have budget authority? Oh, well, shucks, right? So we think through that process and we get back to the tough questions of how are we going to resource this project? If we solve this today, what other problems does that cause in your organization?
That happens all the time. And it happens in big companies and small companies. Every company is resource limited. Every company has the priorities that are set forward by the executive leadership of the company. And it may be a 10-man company, it may be a 100-man company, it could be a 1,000-person company. But the reality is they are all limited by the things that they are going to invest in. You do need to have maybe a couple starts and stops along the way. We're going to back up and cover things again. We're going to cover more people. We're going to do all of that. I think that's very important to figure out what's going on. And the step, you're right, the step that they tend to skip because it's tough for salespeople to do is, why won't you buy this? And that's never the name of the step or the stage of the CRM. Why won't you do this? But it is a conversation that you have to have with somebody of authority enough to figure that out. Why wouldn't you do this? If I showed you this kind of ROI, why wouldn't you buy? Well, I'm sorry, Kevin, but that ROI is just not good enough because I can get a better ROI doing something else. And that's the
Absolutely.
reality. That's just fact of life. I used to sell a lot to mid-market companies. I was selling an ERP system at the time. And we used to say that the owner of the company could buy our product and make his company more profitable, or he could buy a yacht instead. What's more important to him?
Yep.
And maybe he wants that yacht really badly. He doesn't want to spend more money because it's his money. And those were LLC kind of companies where it was his money. And he was the person making the decision at the end. And does he need a yacht? I don't know. Does he really want to make the company better because he's trying to sell it in 3 years? I don't know the answer to that. But that's the answers that the salesperson need to ask. And so we have to make sure that we're following a sales process with enough confidence that we can actually get that done.
This type of conversation can also happen when you're restarting a deal. And I know we're tight on time here, but everything we've said today can also be applied to the deal that came up and went to no decision 6 months ago and has now come back to light. That, especially when those situations happen, for those of you in sales leadership management, the question that I want to tactically have you say in those leadership meetings is, have we requalified them? It's not, what's the next step? It's, hey, is the quote still good? We're not doing that. We have to actually go back, and this is a prime example of backing up the train a long way. You've already got the scope written. You've already got a lot of the post work done, but you've got to go back and requalify that deal in every way, shape, and form. It's, are there new people? Tell me more about why this has come back up. Is the goal still the same? All of those things that got you to delivering a proposal that went to no decision, we have to really forecast those, because we could invest a lot of money. The most expensive way, Sean, to buy an ERP is to buy it twice. The most way to try and sell an ERP system is to try and sell it twice and end up with no decision twice. Holy cow. If we're thinking about cost containment and backing up a sales process, this is one of those prime areas to not let cost encroach on the entire profitability of your sales organization. We're right here at 15 minutes, and we appreciate your time. These topics are a lot of fun for us. When you're thinking through your business and how you're growing and scaling for the rest of 2023, or if you're listening to this in 2024, we appreciate your insight and on the problems that are going on in your business. As always, thanks. Good to see you, and talk to you next week. And that's a wrap. Thanks again for joining Kevin and Sean on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Tune in every Tuesday, or when our podcast drops every Tuesday at 4:30, wherever you consume your podcast. And don't miss our monthly CEO workshop, where we unpack some of the big CEO questions facing your business. Until next time, we're looking forward to seeing you. Happy selling.